Well, the late President John Mills was a very extraordinary personality. And I recall seeing him on the playing fields of the Legon University, where he was either playing hockey or playing football or playing some other game, or just simply being in the stands and observing, sports activities and so on. And he was so intensely involved in sports that it was amazing. I mean, for a professor of his standing to be that actively involved in sports was something to behold. I mean, that was extraordinary. Professor Mills was not your ordinary, everyday politician. He brought something to the table which no other politician has been able to do. No other politician that I know of has been able to do. And it was just his simplicity, his honesty, his absolute lack of craving for public attention and so on. These were remarkable things about him. He was so ordinary that it was very, very difficult to see him as a head of state, even when he had been elected as president of Ghana. One of the things that he did, which totally shocked me, was that he was living in the Osu Castle. That was the place where he lived. He had a house somewhere on the Spintex Road, but he hardly went to the house. And he would get himself holed in this small room in the castle, just one small bedroom, and space just enough to seat about 6 people and so on. And he was there all the time. So one day I simply asked him, why don't you go home? I mean, this place is so uncomfortable, why don't you go home? And he said, well, he didn't want to be driving through the streets with sirens blaring to disturb people and so on. So he would stay in the castle and go home Friday evenings when there was no traffic and when he didn't have to use the siren. And Sunday evenings he would sneak into the castle when he didn't have to use the siren. And that was so considerate, so considerate, so very unusual of today's politicians and so on. So that was something really remarkable about him. I learned later on that it was also impossible to discuss anything with him in secret. He didn't believe in confidentiality and so on. So if you went to him and you had a conversation with him about another person and the other person didn't look good enough and so on, he would call the other person and ask you to repeat what you have just said. I mean, there was one particular case where I was on radio criticizing his Minister for Foreign Affairs. And just before I finished, I got a call from him. Just after I finished, I got a call from him. He said, what are you saying about my minister? And I said, well, everything I'm saying is true. And he said, can you stop everything and come to the castle? And I went to the castle and said, can you repeat what you were saying on radio? And I repeated it, and he asked for evidence, and I pointed him in several directions and so on. By the time we got to the middle of the conversation, the door opens, the minister walks in, and he says, Kwesi, you have been complaining about this minister. Can you say everything you said about the minister? And that was incredible. And he did it to so many people. So he didn't encourage gossip. He didn't like to hear stories that he couldn't authenticate and so on. He was that honest and open.